My name is Ingrid DeQuinn, and welcome. This event is being hosted and sponsored by StreamMate and Pineapple Support. So it was originally supposed to be done at the XBiz in Miami, and it was supposed to be a different topic. And when Leah asked me if I would be willing to do this on the internet, I of course said yes, and I had no idea I was going to do it technologically. So thank you ahead for your patience. Okay. Hello again, everybody. Amanda, let me see who else. Effie, you made it. Great. Okay, so the topic for today is going to be resilience, but as it pertains to how we can manage things like anxiety and depression. And the reason why we picked that topic is for the obvious reasons. It's what we're dealing with right here and right now. These are unprecedented times. Like, who thought that, 3 months ago, the whole world would be in lockdown and we would be dealing with a pandemic, and we would be dealing with things like having to be locked up and being far away from our families. And, some people have small children and have to deal with that and work at the same time. So if that's been an issue for you, or, things are a struggle for you, go ahead and chime in, let me know. I'm reading the chats as you guys go along, and that's great. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in and discuss, what is resilience and why is it important? We talk about, that's a word we throw around in everyday language all the time, but it means something much more profound when you're talking about your mental health, when you're talking about your well-being just in general. Okay. We deal with a lot of dimensions in positive mental health as therapists. But one of the things that is not always overtly discussed is the concept of resilience. And that, what does it mean? It's the process of being able to adapt and bounce back quickly in times of stress or times of change that are difficult, right? It's the grit. It's that thing that allows us to cope and adapt, right? And you would think, well, have you ever met somebody that that just seems to go through hard times and do a really good job at it, and you figure, how do they survive that? How do they do that? Is it something they're born with? So that's a multifaceted question. I'm going to get to those answers, but the fact of the matter is that resilience is actually pretty common. And some of the books that I'm going to be recommending to you were actually written after having studied prisoners of war from Vietnam. And what they've discovered is that resilience is actually quite common. We're all actually naturally resilient. Our bodies are designed to withstand stresses and to survive hardships. Our minds, the whole thing, it's all part of our DNA. But the road to resistance is often paved with emotional distress and strain. And so you figure, well, how does that work? There is a whole component to it in terms of neurological basis, a physical basis, a mental basis. The good news is resilience is something that can be learned, okay? And it can be learned by developing new thoughts, new behaviors, and new actions. And it sounds like it's a lot, and it can be, but here's the thing about wanting to feel better. Here's the thing about mental health, right? Making small shifts make a big difference, okay? So I'm going to now start to discuss what the definitions of resilience are, and then we'll get into what resilient people look like, and then what are the specific things that you can walk away with today, okay, that you can start practicing to start feeling that shift in movements in your own life, okay? So the American Psychological Association defines resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of trauma or tragedy, threats, or other significant sources of stress. And we're also going to talk about stress and recognizing stress in our lives. And that's another word that we like to throw around a lot in the world. And if I told you right here and now that stress does not exist, you're probably all going to leave the meeting, but it's true, it doesn't exist. And I'll get to that later. Just make sure, if I don't touch on that topic in detail and answering that question, go ahead and make some notes in the chats. Okay. But here's the important thing about resilience. it's a complex concept in that there isn't just, oh, you get, this one is resilient and that's it. It's on a continuum, okay? And it also has different degrees of strengths, if you will. So you have different kinds of factors in resilience, and it's also in a continuum, which means what? It means that you might be resilient at certain times of your life and not so much at other times in your life, okay? And then you might be really resilient at, dealing with things at work, but when you get home, you're not so resilient in the, relationship world. And so the idea is that it's not just about being tough and strong and being gritty in general. It's multifaceted and it's on a continuum. Okay, I hope did that make sense? Is everybody, you could give me a thumbs up in the chat. Let me know that makes sense to you guys. I need to know if there's any questions. You can go ahead and pop them up. I'll go ahead and read those as we go along. Okay, so far so good. The other thing is that resilience can change over time depending on your interactions and the environment around you. So for example, in the middle of a pandemic, you might start to feel that after the week 8, that you might feel less resilient than when you started out in week 1, right? And that would make sense because we're all going through it in different ways for different reasons. And yes, across time, your resilience can change. It could get stronger, it could get weaker, and depends on the area it is too. So what does that mean in terms of, for example, mental health and how you would work on that? Well, clinicians and researchers are starting to understand that when we're working with our clients, just focusing on evaluating what doesn't work, we're starting to look at being able to see in people's lives what does work. And so the approach now is not just a question of, oh, what's wrong with you? No, let's start taking a look at what we're doing well, okay? And maximize on that. Because if it was effective before, we can build on that. That's one of the biggest premise about resilience that is important to keep in mind, okay? So we're kind of moving away from the purely deficit model concept to more of an inclusion of strength and capacity and competency when we talk about resilience and we talk about mental health, okay? And the whole point of this is you want to feel better. You want to be able to deal with the hardships of life, and you want to feel better about how you go into things, right? So, and not to, make this all woo or anything, it's really about balance, right? You understand that there's dark times and then there's good times. There's yin, there's yang. And that's like kind of like an Eastern way of looking at things, right? And it's about understanding that you can ride the waves. You can sometimes you have sorrow on one hand and you have a hardship on another, and those things can coexist. And that's part of being resilient, understanding that, right? And life isn't always going to be easy, but it doesn't have to always be so hard either, okay? Where whatever you resist persists, right? So if something's giving you a hard time and it's persisting, then we can make shifts, and your mental state is going to make a big difference about that. So it's natural to have a tendency to want to control things, and there are things that you can control and there are things that you can't. And your process for developing resilience is going to be a very personal one, right? So trying to compare yourself to other people or even people closest to you is of absolutely no value, because it is really a personal thing, okay? There's no magic formula, right? So onward to measuring resilience. How do we know someone's resilient? How do I know if I'm resilient? Well, I have here, I'm going to share with you, and hopefully I can do this. Let me see. I was hoping to be able to do this and share some of my files with you, because I have a goodie bag, which it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to do that. Let me see, to all panelists. Okay. Not seeing how I'm going to do that right away. So what I am going to do, however, is I have a nifty little thing. There are two things. There are many different tests and ways that you can go ahead and assess resilience, but there are two that I've actually included in your mental health goodie bag for resilience. One is called the Davidson Resilience Scale, okay? And what it does is it measures the components of resilience. So your ability to adapt to change, your ability to deal with what comes along, your ability to cope with stress, to stay focused and think clearly, how to get encouraged, and ability to handle unpleasant things. So those are the different types of components to resilience, and that's what it's actually trying to measure. So I've included that in your goodie bag. If I can figure out how to add it on here in the screen, I would. But in the meantime, so obviously they show you how to, the document that I have for you, it shows you how to give yourself a little test. There are two forms of it. There's a long version of it and a short version of it. They're both effective and valid tests for resilience. And obviously, the higher your score, the higher the number that you get, the higher your score for resilience in terms of the components of resilience, okay? The next one that I included in your goodie bag is the Brief Resilience Scale. And the reason why I picked that one is that contrary to the first assessment, the Davidson scale, the Brief Resilience Scale, okay, that one actually measures how quickly you can adapt to stress. It measures adaptability, which is it's not a concrete concept, right? It's not a tangible thing, so to speak. But what it does is it is able to look at how well you perceive things and how quickly you can respond to it effectively. So that's kind of a measure of adaptability. And that one is about, I'm trying to think how many questions it has, about 6 questions, which is not a lot. And again, it shows you how to score it. And of course, the higher the scores, the higher indicative that is that of your adaptability. So for those of you who may want it, and if I can't figure out how to put it here, what was that one called? That one is the short one, the Brief Resilience Scale. Question from, let me see, from Pam and Nim. Okay, yeah. So I could, if everybody think, at the end of the session, the webinar, I'm going to go ahead and give you my email information. So for those of you who want the goodie bag, you can go ahead and send me an email and I will shoot that out to you. It will have, every time I say something about goodie bag in this webinar, it will be included in that goodie bag so you guys can go ahead and use it. Let me see. Yes, Nim, that one right there, that's correct. Okay, he was asking if that was the correct link for the Davidson resilience thing. Yeah. Okay, so you know what resilience is. We talked about why it's important, okay? Now you're gonna have in your goodie bag, you can give yourself a quick assessment. Let me take a look. What's going on with myself? You know, what do I need to know here? Where do I start, right? So the next part, we're gonna look at it. What are the traits and qualities that, like, for example, the Connor and Davidson scale are looking at? They wanna look at, you know, are you able to recognize your limits? Are you able to control and have self-efficacy? And, you know, can you pass successes? Yeah, they looks at your sense of humor. Okay, these are different components and traces of resilience that we're going to talk about more in depth as we go along. But that's kind of what they were also measuring. Yes, that is my. Oh, thank you, Leah. I appreciate that. That is, you can use that email, that fleur-de-lis therapy@gmail.com. That is my email. You can go ahead and send me a message there too. Okay. So resilient skills, and how do you train them? Well, also included, well, so there, I have to say, I included in your goodie bag, there's going to be something called the Resilience Building Plan worksheet. Okay, that is all, that's what we're going to discuss right now. So the reason why I'm kind of going into this piece first before going into the various components individually is I wanted to, and as I was preparing for this webinar, I was using my family as guinea pigs. I can go ahead and, you know, they can bounce off ideas. So I was doing it with my brother-in-law, and he says to me, so if I wanted to start to work on resilience, what would I do? And I said, my first, you know, I put my therapist hat on. I was like, well, you know, I'd have to first know what's going on with you. You know, let's discuss it. Let's see what's going on. Let's see where your strengths are. Let's see what you're struggling with. And then I thought to myself, you know, if someone were alone and maybe didn't want to feel like they wanted to go to see a therapist, or maybe that they just kind of wanted to tackle this, and then what can I offer them to help them get a head start without necessarily knowing specifically what they would want to work on? And so there's a professor, Sidney A. Okay. He's the professor in the Department of Psychiatry and at the Oregon Health and Science University. And he came up with, which is also in your goodie bag, a resilience building worksheet. Okay. And so what he did is he kind of broke down a pathway, a process into, I think it's 8. Yes. It's into 8 different categories, okay? So one of the things, the first thing he says, first of all, let's start recognizing what your stress level is. What are the signs of stress that you're experiencing, okay? And again, I wish I could pull it up now, but I can't. Yeah. And so what I included in your goodie bag was a stress symptom checklist, okay? And it's basically a laundry list. And the idea is the more checks you have on that sheet, the more stressors you have in your life, okay? So earlier on, remember I said to you guys, would it surprise you if I said stress doesn't exist? And of course, I didn't hear any notes on the chats, but stress actually does not exist. Stress is a concept. And the concept is this. Stress is how you react, listen to the word react, to a number of stressors in your life. So if you were to think about who isn't stressed in the world, like if you were to think out there, who doesn't have any stress? Now you can think, well, maybe, my grandma's just at home. She's great. She's in health. She doesn't have any worries. Or, maybe my best friend, she married a wealthy guy. She doesn't have to work. We come up with a lot of answers, right? The fact of the matter is nobody, except for people who are maybe in a coma or dead, is not stressed, okay? That's number one. Number two, I want to also give you a notion that hopefully you can shift your relationship to stress, is that stress is actually not a bad thing. We actually need stress in our lives, but we also need good kind of stress. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. So what is it? Why do we care? Okay, so I have a laundry list of stressors in my life. Now what? Well, the whole idea of building resilience is so that you can shift your relationship, A, to stress, and B, shift your response versus reacting. Instead, you're going to choose to respond. That's what resilience allows you to do. And why is that important? Because reacting entails that you're functioning from a reptilian brain, from an emotional brain, okay? And this is neurologically based. If you want to take time to do the research, I actually recommend that you do some research on your own. But the idea with resilience is to get to a place where you can respond. So you're able to then shift the control center from the reptilian emotional brain into now the prefrontal cortex, where your logical brain is, where you can start thinking your way through things, where you can really assess a threat, correctly versus amplifying it. So the idea behind understanding what your stress levels are is to, number one, see how many stressors you've got going on, and also looking at how many times in the day you're probably reacting versus responding, okay? So that's the idea behind that. The next thing he talks about in this resilience building plan worksheet is to focus on building physical hardiness. Again, when we're dealing with resilience, just like most everything else in mental health, especially nowadays, thankfully, we're talking about looking at the human being holistically, and it's not just an academic thing, because all parts of yourself are connected and affect itself. So being physically fit, and I'm not talking about bikini worthy. This is not what this is about. This is about, how's your cardiovascular system, right? How's your blood pressure? Is it constantly spiking up, or is it always down, right? Are you suffering stress headaches? So what can you do to mitigate that? The idea is about helping your body and all of its systems function as well as possible. Okay. So it talks about, for example, what are the things that you could do to help support that? Sleep, your wake sleep pattern. I could have a whole webinar on wake sleep pattern. Okay. Your nutrition. Are you drinking enough water? Sometimes a lot of people are suffering symptoms of depression and anxiety simply because they're not even drinking enough water and their whole body is stressed out. Their blood pressure is high and they're thinking, I have anxiety. No, you just actually need to hydrate. Simple as that. Not all. I'm not suggesting this is all the time. No, I'm just saying that even something as simple as hydration can sometimes mimic anxiety. So paying attention to your body and caring for your body in the simplest of ways can make a big shift in being able to be more resilient. And so one of the techniques is, what is a small change you could do today that would help you out physically, that could help you be more resilient? Like, oh, you know what, I'm not getting enough sleep. So you know what, I'll go to bed 20 minutes earlier today and see if that makes a difference, right? So that's physical. Let me see. He talks about self-soothing activities, relaxation skills, things you could do to relax. And now I really kind of want to focus in on the relaxation thing. It's a big thing. Everybody likes talking about, oh, we need to relax, we need to relax, we need to relax. Great. Meditation is a big word. Everybody wants to get into meditation and so on and so forth. And, oh, you know, I'm going to go and we go to yoga class. We go to, you know, join maybe some Tibetan monks and whatever. I want to kind of demystify that, because really what is meditation? It's single-minded focus with an intent in a relaxed body. That's what it is in a nutshell. So maybe for some who the idea, oh my God, I can't sit there forever in a single position and not think, oh, my brain, I can't do it. Everybody can. And you don't have to do it for 20 minutes at a time. You can do it for just a few minutes at a time. So one of the things that I included in your goodie bag, which I think I have it right here, is the Mindful Attention Awareness Scale, the MAAS, okay? And what it does, it takes there are about 15 items on it, right? And you scale it on almost always to almost never. And they ask you a series of questions that reflect your experience rather than what you think you should be experiencing. And what does that mean? What you're trying to assess is how you're experiencing your interactions with the world, okay? And for example, I'll read you one of the questions that'll probably give you a better idea. It says, I could be experiencing some emotion and not be conscious of it until sometime later. Okay, so is that almost always, almost never? Okay, another question is, I find it difficult to stay focused on what's happening in the present, or I rush through activities without being really attentive to them. All of these questions are designed to see how present are you in the moment and what is it you're focusing on. And again, when we talk about focus, one of the concepts that is really important, not just in terms of resilience and meditation, but in terms of how our mindset and our cognitive agility, which we'll talk about later too, is where you focus, where you place your attention is what's going to be amplified and become more important in that moment. So if you tend to spend a lot of time focusing on the past or an unseen future, you don't have enough time and clarity and prefrontal cortex attention into the here and now. That's what that's about. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody so far? Okay. No notes? I figure that's good. Okay. Another thing that he talks about in terms of mental, physical, the physical hardiness is the word I was trying to get to. He talks about doing self-soothing activities. And so for kids, we obviously, we instinctively know, we rock them, we put blankets on them, we cuddle them. And I cannot stress enough how incredibly important tactile is. And of course, in the middle of a quarantine, while everybody is sequestering and, social distancing and all of that, let me see, taking too many notes, really. Okay. Thank you. We're missing that, right? We're missing that, the human touch. Anybody remember Rick Springfield's song, We All Need the Human Touch? I know I'm dating myself on this one, maybe for, I'm not. So that it is true. One of the things that we study in terms of human development that I found was fascinating, maybe some of you already know this information, is if you take a human baby, okay, and you feed it, you clothe it, you make sure that it's healthy, but you don't hold it and cuddle it, within 3 months, that human child will die. And sure, as adults, we probably don't need to be cuddled and held and caressed maybe as much as a baby, but we still need it. We're still humans, okay? We need that human touch. So I know right now it might be, for those of you who might be alone or sequestered alone, that might be a more difficult thing, but doing it for yourself, giving yourself a massage or getting that tactile input is important. So even in self-care, getting, massaging your own feet, massaging your own shoulders, really getting that tactile input is really important to help. It helps us self-regulate as well. Involving all of your senses, your sense of smell, those who, don't have allergies and it's not difficult for them to have smells and odors. I recommend aromatherapy. Lavender is the 101 of aromatherapy when it comes for relaxations. Visually, there's a reason why people use puppies and cute things to sell things to kids, because it elicits a part of our brain that just wants us to nurture, and we want to hold and touch those things. Listening to music that is soothing, that kind of stuff. Even taste. Chocolate, us ladies, right? We love chocolate. It always does wonderful things for people. So teas, for some people, they just love a variety of teas. Anything that helps you to soothe like that are really good ways to help bolster your resilience, okay? The next part on his plan, he discusses identity and use your strengths. So describing a time when you did well, what did you learn about yourself, how might you apply this strength in the future. So he walks you through what kinds of questions to ask yourself. Turns the tea on the kettle. I love that. That's great. So he'll oftentimes, it's not necessarily telling you what to do. He'll start to ask you questions so that you start thinking about, oh, hey, wait a minute. How did I get this done in the past? And how do I identify my own strengths? Well, how did I do it in the past? This is again, going back to the original concept we discussed earlier, which is maximizing on our strengths, not on what is wrong and what's not working. Going back and looking and see when we have been successful in eyes to working things through. So that's the idea there. The next piece that he talks about is increasing positive emotions on a daily basis. Okay, so he's making suggestions like identify sources of humor, expressing gratitude, making a list of accomplishments. All those help elicit those kinds of things. He next goes on to discussing, he says, engage in meaningful activities. That's a big piece that I will get in when I discuss the different factors of resilience. Meaningful activities. I am a huge proponent of really being in touch with your existential self. Meaning what? Meaning having a good understanding of what I call, what is your primary directive in life? What is your purpose? And why is it meaningful for you? Okay. And it's not going to be the same for everybody. What could be for you is not for me. Again, this is a very personal journey. So he asks you specific questions like, what kinds of activities do you find meaningful? What happened to you the day that was meaningful on your day that's meaningful for you on a regular basis? So again, it's the concept of what is your purpose and why is your purpose important? that in and of itself is I could spend a whole of that. It's an integral part even of my therapy when my clients, because, and I'll get into further detail with that later on. So the next thing he talks about is countering unhelpful thinking, and that as it relates to the factors of resilience. I'm not going to go too deeply into this, because what he does is he suggests several exercises to do, such as, say, for example, he says, if you can't stop thinking about something, write about it a couple of times over a 4-week period for about 15 minutes at a time, and notice how your story changes or your perspective becomes clearer over time. I love that, because what he's encouraging you to do is to take a look at something that you're having difficulty not thinking about, writing about it, and then seeing your progress and your evolution over time. That's your process. That's a personal process. There's nothing better than that in terms of trying to sink in and anchor in something you're trying to learn or something new for yourself. Okay. And just the fact that you could see that evolution over time is very valuable, because it's part of getting to know yourself. Again, an integral part of being able to develop resilience. Okay. And the last piece that he brings, he said in the, or it's not the last piece, one of the components of, I should say, of countering unhelpful thinking, and this one is, I love, he says, remember a hero. And one of the factors of building on resilience is, imitating a hero, finding some inspiration from without, where you want to emulate a certain behavior or characteristic. Is that list available in the goodie bag? Yes. So that list that everything that I've talked about right here is part of the Resilience Building Plan worksheet, and that's in the goodie bag too. So you can be able to print it out. I think it's it's a page document. Okay. When I mean pages, I mean Microsoft page. Okay. No, sorry, not Microsoft. The word processor for Macs. Everybody understand? Again, I'm sorry, guys. I'm not real big techie, so I get a little confused in my vocabulary. I hope everybody got that. Okay. So yes, to answer your question, Caitlin. Yes, all of this, you don't have to write this down. This is part of your goodie bag. So if you're trying to keep up with me talking, I'm trying to pack all of this information in the hour that we promised. We're going to try to keep this information in. Okay. And so the last piece of that work plan is to create a caring community. And it's about connecting with friends, identifying sources of support at home, at work, and otherwise, and practicing good communication skills. So let me see. Document chapters, resilience building. There you go. I think Nim found something. Somebody's doing their work online. Very good. Okay. That would be an example of how you could, if you didn't know even where to begin, if you kind of followed that worksheet plan, you might discover some really awesome things about yourself, and definitely things that you could work on. As I go through the different factors of resilience, I do books that you could read that relate to that specific factor, maybe series or movies that you could take a look at that would be inspirational, helpful in that area. Specific exercises, which I got a package plan from the Positive Psychology website, which they had some really wonderful exercises. And so what I did is I kind of made like a part of the goodie bag for you. Some of them were free. I went ahead and added the free ones too, which you can go on that site and find that information as well. All right, so onward and upward. I think it's important here, before we go into the individual factors, to discuss the different types of resilience, okay? You would think, well, isn't resilience? Well, yes. And then they have different kinds of resilience. So there's number one, there's the natural resilience. And that's the natural resilience. So that's the one I was discussing earlier, where it just seems like there's some people that are just born tough. Like you just can't keep them down. And not to make myself any more important than anybody else at all. My sister calls me a cockroach. She calls me her roach. And I know that sounds terrible. It's a backhanded compliment, and it's one of the highest forms of compliment I have ever received in my life. And she still calls me her roach to this day. Because I don't know where in the popular, myths, that cockroaches wouldn't die even in a nuclear war. Well, that's why she calls me a cockroach, because I can take a hit and take a hit and take a hit. And I've had quite a few in my life, and I managed to get through on the other end, a lot of times for the better. So that is part of what they call natural resilience. And typically, people go through stresses and traumas. Oftentimes people with natural resilience, and with others as well, come out with what's called post-traumatic growth, PTG. Okay. And that's your ability basically to have a positive experience come out as a result of a struggle or a hardship, right? It's the silver lining. It's okay, this sucked, this was terrible. But I learned something from it, or I grew from it, or this came out of it. You give value to the suffering by appreciating what came out of it, okay? And so oftentimes what happens when you've got post-traumatic growth is people can come out with a better appreciation of life, or they're more connected to God, or they start to look at working on their relationships because they have a deeper appreciation and gratitude for the things that they have or the people that are in their lives. They decide that it's an inspiration for them to go out and learn how to do things and grow, for example. And for example, right now, right, a lot of people are starting to see the shifts in their own workplace. Like they're starting to have to reevaluate how they're going to be earning a living, and maybe they need to sharpen certain skills, or maybe they need to make a shift. So going through a hardship, I love the bullshit I've been through. Oh, that's great, Nim. That's awesome. Yes, right? Yes, when we go through these hellish experiences, you kind of come out going, crap, thank God for my family, or thank God for my pastor, or thank God for my kids, or thank God this is the career that I chose. Or you go, you know what? Okay, that was a really shitty choice. Oh, forgive my language. Hopefully we're all adults. That was a really crappy decision on my part. But you know what? Thank God I learned this here and now so I can have time to fix it. It's about coming through it, going, okay, I can do better. It's possible to do better. And then you go with it, right? And one example of natural resilience is kids under the ages of about 6, 7-ish, which is typically developmental, what we call the age of reason, where kids can start add things up, they can start making sense of things, right? Isn't it interesting how they just have this natural joy about life, right? They have this natural, they're inspired. There's just always in that happy little place. Okay, maybe not when they're throwing a tantrum, but there's this energy around younger kids that just seems more hopeful and optimistic about things. They don't have that catastrophic thinking oftentimes that adults will have. That's what natural resilience is. Adaptive resilience is the second kind, or the next one on the list. And that's the one that is developed by, and as is quoted here, trial by fire. That's the one that happens when you didn't choose to be placed in this tough situation, but you had to learn to change and adapt. Okay, that's the one. That's learning how to roll with the punches, sort of. Is, I think, in my mind, the most encouraging is restored resilience, or it's also known as learned resilience. And that is what I find to be the most encouraging of when we think resilience and we classify resilience, because that's the one that I think brings about the most hope. Because yes, it's true. Some people are genetically they're happier, they're born happier people, and they're tougher, it seems. But you can learn resilience. You can develop it. You can practice it over time. So even if you weren't naturally born the ha-ha happy kid, that's okay. Okay? That's perfectly fine, right? Because we can build on that, right? You can learn techniques to restore your natural resilience. And that's why I think it's so incredible. That's the whole point of this presentation, is to give, I want you guys, and it's not about what I want, I understand, but what I'm hoping to do is so you guys can all walk away, even if I'm filling your head really, really quickly here, that you can all walk away with an understanding that you're not stuck forever, that you could always find something, that find hope and find a way to claw your way out of whatever it is, because some of us are in worse situations than others. That's the reality of life. Okay, but there's hope. There's things you can do. Now, think of this as your resilience bank. Okay, you might have more of one and less of another. Maybe you're strong in all three. That is perfectly normal. Okay, but if you're strong in one kind of resilience, the others can compensate for that. That's what's amazing about this. Okay. Now, before we go along, because I'm kind of moving along here, and I really want to get into the different factors, I do have to make a note, okay? That before we continue, is that while all of this stuff that I'm going to get you is juicy and good stuff, right? If you or someone you know is suffering from a major depressive disorder or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or really high anxiety disorder, you might not be able to be in a place where you can think clearly or even regulate your moods on your own. And I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you seek the help of a professional that can help you work through your mood disorder, or whatever it is. It might be a hindrance from really practicing some of the materials in here, because if you're struggling with keeping your prefrontal cortex brain online because you're deeply depressed or the anxiety is completely out of control, then you might definitely want to have the help of a mental health professional help you walk through that stuff, in addition to the material that I'm sharing in here. I was going to originally touch upon quickly the difference between post-traumatic and complex trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. We're running a little bit short on time. So one thing I will say is, if you think that you or somebody you know might be suffering from complex post-traumatic stress disorder, I highly recommend too that you seek the help of a professional who's trained in trauma-informed care, because that does make a big difference into how you can work your way through some of that material. That said, the most important thing, whether you're going in for mood disorder, whether you're treating complex trauma, whether you're wanting to build on resilience, whatever it is, whatever mental health professional, whether it's a life coach, a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist, the most important thing is your relationship with your therapist, how well you relate to your therapist, because 80% of your healing is going to be derived from the quality of that relationship. Okay, that is the most important thing. So again, even if you're not going in for one specific thing, if you've got a good rapport with your healer, which is you and the person who, either your counselor or your coach, that relationship is going to be the pivotal point for both of you. Okay, so book recommendation, also going to be in the goodie bag list. Highly recommend the book, The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Hopefully I did not torture that name. That was a hugely important book, especially when it deals to complex trauma. Okay, so now we are going to go into different factors of resilience. We'll start with optimism. Oh, just have positive thoughts, people say. If I had a dime for every time somebody said that and somebody suggested I say that to my clients, I'd be a bajillionaire by now, right? The body, is that the body remembers? No, Nim, it's not. I don't think it's the same book. I don't think it's the same book. No, this is the body keeps score. Okay. Sorry about the interruption. Okay, so what is optimism and why is it important? And is it, oh, just be happy? No, it's not. Optimism is about being future oriented. Okay. And the biggest difference is that there's a, okay. Yes, Leah. There is a difference between optimists and pessimists. And what it is that optimists are thinking into the future in terms of, okay, this kind of sucks now, but it doesn't have to in the future, right? What can I do about it? There's a distinct difference in that of expectations between an optimist and a pessimist, okay? The pessimist is gloom and doom, right? They expect things to go badly, right? So how do I incorporate this happiness, this optimism, this positive idea of the future, but in a way that doesn't feel contrived, that's inauthentic, that's not believable, because your brain knows when you're BSing it, okay? Well, there's a little something called realistic optimism, right? It means that you can, take a look, you can face at the crappy situation, you can assess it and say, oh yeah, this sucks. But at the same time, you don't stay stuck there. You don't remain focused on the negative. You disengage rapidly, and then you start thinking about, oh, you know what? It can be better next time, or I can do this differently next time, or sometime down the road, it doesn't have to be like this, it could be different. That's what realistic optimism gives you, okay? There was a prisoner of war named Admiral James, and I found a quote, I found it very interesting, and this was in an address he made to West Point Academy in 1983. And so he goes along and talks about experience of war, and one of the things he says is, babbling optimists are the bane of existence for one under stress. Meaning what? Don't give me a bunch of fluff of things that have no substance. Give me something real. That's what a realistic optimist does. That's a huge part of changing, shifting mindset for resilience. Okay, next one, facing fear. It's just an adaptive response, right? It means not engaging in avoidant behavior, which if you've suffered trauma, if you've experienced something painful, our brains are designed to do that for us to survive. So you're thinking, I'm going against my nature. In part, you are, yes. Because on the one hand, we're designed to avoid pain, things that threaten our lives, difficulties, because we're trying to stay alive. It may seem counterintuitive to go toward it, but that's exactly how you build grit. But the idea is to do it over time, to practice it in smaller doses so that when the big humdinger comes, you're prepared, okay? Using fear as a guide to really place us in an opportunity to grow, that's the shifting of the mindset, right? How many times when you were a kid, like, oh my God, you broke the vase, you don't want to tell mom, like, you're going to get in trouble, right? So you kind of hide it. You take all the pieces, you put it in a bag, you bury it, the dog finds the stupid thing, the mom finds out you lied, and it gets worse. When we engage in avoidant behavior, we make things worse, okay? So facing your fears helps you build your self-esteem. How so? Because when you start to learn that when you face things, right, and you start to deal with them, you start building a toolkit of how to manage difficult times, you become more confident in your agency, in your capacity to deal with life, okay? Let me see. I love this one. This is, from a military point of view, right? Knowing your enemy, that's the idea, facing your fear. It's breaking down what you're facing, what your enemy is. Well, if I'm going to defeat this, I need to know what I'm dealing with. That's the idea behind facing your fear, okay? And for that one, I have Leaving the Comfort Zone PDF. That's also in the goodie bag. Okay, so that one's something that you can go ahead and use to help start to get you into that mindset of being comfortable with facing your fears. And anybody a parent out there? Anybody have kids? No? Yes? Okay. I included, okay, wonderful. So I've included in your bag, I think it's a link that I put in there. It's off thehealthychildren.org. They have a fantastic article on building resilience in children. Some of the components, okay, some of the components are very similar, the same as it is for adults. But this one is different in that because for children, they're at a different developmental stage, or some things are really important. One of the things I love about the list, and they talk about the 7 C's, and some of you have done mental health before probably know about them. But that's actually one of the things that is really fantastic about this is the confidence building has to do with being able to face your fears and allowing your kids to learn how to fall, take a hit, right? And that's part of what we need to do too. We oftentimes we view failure as something that's wrong. Shifting our relationship to failure is another big piece to resilience, right? What I've discovered over time with my own clients is that when you're dealing with fear, okay, and you're having to face that and you're working through your stuff, right? And you think that you failed at something. It's not really about failing. You're really just learning something. And what have people, and people can understand this intellectually, that it makes sense to them. But what I find is the biggest hindrance for people when it comes to facing their fears and facing their failures, what they label as failures, is the self-judgment that comes in. So here's what I invite you to do. Versus seeing your failures as another opportunity to bash yourself at what you didn't do right, because it's useless, it doesn't help you in any way, is being able to look at your failures and say, okay, I didn't do that right. How could I change it in the future? How could I do it right in the future? Part of that requires that you have to have enough self-forgiveness, and that's a whole other bag of beans, but that's a component, right? But going in with the idea of not judging yourself and simply observing, noticing, this is what happened, this didn't work. If I did something wrong to somebody, I can make an amend. If I did something wrong to myself, I can self-forgive. And then I can figure out how to not do it that way again, okay? That's part of accepting, part of facing the fear and shifting your relationship to failure. Okay. Next piece, moral compass. I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time on this piece, although it's still really important. It's about figuring out what I call figuring out your true north, your guiding light. So I'll share a personal here with you guys. Back in the day, right, 3 months ago or 2 months ago, when we would, some of us have drive our kids to school. I drive my girls to school every morning and I drop them off and I tell them 3 things. I tell them, remember who you are, make your day count, and know that I love you. And I start with remember who you are, because having a solid sense of self, knowing things in your soul that are just not negotiable, right? Having a solid sense of beliefs, a value system that is unshakable, right? That's about remembering who you are, so that when you're confronted with, for example, if you're in school, bullying, if you're a child, in bullying, even in the workplace, happens a lot, right? We don't necessarily label that as in adult language, but yes, bullying occurs even in adults. Knowing what your center self, your core belief system is, that's your true north. That's your guiding light. That is important. And sometimes we have to reassess and reevaluate that in our own lives as we become adults, because sometimes we have a set of belief systems that were based on other things from other people. And so reevaluating that, reassessing that is really an important aspect of resilience. The other part of the moral compass is altruism. You guys ever heard of a story, for example, of people who've lost it all, or suffered horrendous tragedies, and they go on to do philanthropic work, or they go on to become part of, a member of society where they contribute or give back to. Giving back, paying it forward to things outside of you, gives you that sense of connectedness, that altruism. That too is an important piece of resilience. Sometimes for people that becomes their purpose, that becomes meaningful to them. Again, you'll start to see how a lot of these factors start to bleed into each other. It's all interconnected, and understandably so. Next piece, religion and spirituality. And I tread on this very, very lightly because I want to be careful to not offend anybody, because it's not really about religion. If you're religious, then rely on that, okay? If you're spiritual, go ahead and rely on that. If you're an atheist, there's nothing wrong with that. Rely on that. And here's what I would offer you. The recommendations I make in this section, okay, are really religious and even spiritually neutral, so to speak, okay? So one of the books that I recommend that you read that I think could be very helpful in helping build resilience and other components too. This book is called The Intention Experiment, also in the list, on the goodie bag list. So if you don't pick it up now, that's fine. And the idea behind that is this, it's the notion of understanding that we're connected to something bigger than ourselves. And why would that be important? Right? It matters because we're all interconnected. We're not riding this wave alone, right? If you go back to the baby example that I gave you earlier, we need humans. We need to know that we're connected to something bigger because it gives value and meaningfulness to our lives. Even if you're like, well, I don't believe in God and I don't think anything happens after that, that's fine. You're connected to the universe. In case we all forgot, we all came from that singular point in time when we had the Big Bang. We all come from that same singular moment in time and space. By virtue of that alone, we're all connected. We're part of something bigger, okay? And the reason why I recommend the book, The Intention Experiment, is because it's a scientifically based book, and you can judge and assess the validity of that yourself, where basically the idea is the power of prayer, whether you want to call it prayer, whether you want to call it meditation, whether you want to call it just purely intent, has measurable, validated consequences, in the sense that you can move a positive intention towards something, yourself or somebody or an organization, and it really does have a positive effect. So incorporating that into your life, developing that into your life, is also an important piece of resilience. And so how would you cultivate spirituality for those of you who are interested? Spend some time meditating, designate a space in your home where you can practice this, where you create feng shui, being what it is. If your environment's inviting, it will elicit certain feelings in you. This is why when you go to restaurants, they use certain colors to make you want to eat. So your environment, that also part of resilience. Listening to music that brings you into a space where you can feel calm and at peace and tranquil and connect with yourself, and it creates an environment where you can introspect. Also, big important piece. If you're religious, even if you're spiritual, or even if you're an atheist, quote, does anybody remember the book Charlotte's Web? That's one of my all-time favorite books, children's books. Yeah, you do, huh? Okay. The E.B. White goes ahead and he quotes Charlotte. Obviously, that's the little spider in the book. She says, the beloved spider at the heart of the story tells the pig whose life she saved. She says, By helping you, perhaps, I was trying to lift, heaven knows, anyone's life can stand a little of that. There is nothing more wonderful when we feel connected to people around us. That is what feeds. Now, some of us enjoy it more than others, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. I think many of us have seen the memes on Facebook, right? Life before quarantine, me, life after quarantine. There's no changes for those of, some of us are homebodies and we like being home, but we all do need that connectiveness, right? Um, so maybe some of us are not comfortable. Maybe we're shy. Maybe it's hard for us to reach out. But you can, even if you just get up when you can finally go to the store, smile at people. You'll see that literally the world will smile back at you. If somebody's grumpy, you can't help them, right? Call somebody you've intended to call for a while. So, you know what? I should have called my uncle. I really miss him. Reach out to somebody on Facebook, if you're shy, attend social gatherings of people that are, interested in the same sort of things. If you're interested in certain activities, when we finally can get back to our lives, maybe hiking groups or book clubs or things of the sort. And while that's not all very obvious necessarily for everybody, what I did include also in the goodie bag, I included, this is the mhanational.org. It's basically, it's a site where you can find a list of okay. So again, trying to give you guys, ways to either enhance or develop each one of these factors in your lives. And for some, I do understand that socially, especially right now, that a lot of us are still in quarantine, reaching out. A lot of these groups now have chapters online that you can reach out to, and so that you're not feeling so isolated and alone. Okay, so hopefully that'll be a helpful piece for you. The next one that I want to talk about is, I'm trying to stick as much close possible as I can as time. Role models. Believe it or not, and this is, by the way, one of the reasons why the people who are in marketing and business are so effective, is they understand, nowadays we have things called influencers. I'm not very big in social media, but these are people who, that's what they do. They influence people. They become role models for people. So if they say this product is good or that product is not, and this whatever, people are likely to follow through and they believe it. Well, you can use that same concept in your own life, right? You can literally build resilience factors around imitating people you admire. It's an extremely powerful tool. Okay. Why do we read self-help? Because somebody went through it before you, and they're telling you, hey, this worked for me. Try it out. Role model, right? Why do people who, go into Buddhism try to find the monk in the mountain on top of the hill? Because he's a role model. He knows stuff you don't. He knows how to do things you don't. Reach out to people that you'd want to have mentors. Ask somebody to mentor you, right? Actually, one of the things I do to help my clients who suffer from trauma, I use something called EMDR. It's not something you can do online. It has to be done in person. But one of the things we EMDR techniques, we can actually help people program qualities and characteristics of people they admire or things that they admire, right? You can do that too within yourself. So again, the idea here is imitation is a powerful learning tool. Use it. Even if it's a fictional character, right? Something or somebody that you admire. If it's a character you admire, go out and develop and harness those characteristics, because that is also a form of fostering resilience, okay? We talked about physical fitness and strengthening. I'm not going to get into that one again because I touched upon it a little bit earlier. We are getting really, really close to time. Brain fitness is also an important piece, because remember, a lot of these factors that we're using is about engaging the prefrontal cortex. So the idea here that I want to touch upon here is brain plasticity. it does adulterate your brain, does make changes in your brain. Well, you can actually shift things back. The idea of using your brain helps keep your brain malleable so it can continue to forge new connections and new synapses, even if it's had injuries, right? The brain is capable of doing that. So whether it's an injury caused, a traumatic brain injury, brain injury caused by trauma, and I don't mean like physical trauma, I mean the experience of emotional behavioral trauma, we can change that. So keeping your brain active, using it, it's really a question of use it or lose it, right? Engaging in that kind of thing that keeps your brain fit. So reading, doing puzzle exercises, doing logic things, keeping your brain nimble allows for that brain plasticity to stay active in your, or strong in your mind, okay? And the last two factors, really huge pieces: cognitive and emotional flexibility. Cognitive reappraisal and gratitude are a form of cognitive flexibility. Being able to take a look at a situation and really assess it correctly, and then being grateful, is another form of appraising that. So what does that mean? So in other words, it's about taking a look. We've talked about it before. You go through a hardship or a difficult time. You look at it honestly and go, okay, this sucks, but I'm grateful that, and then you look for silver linings, okay? That is a question of cognitive flexibility, right? Looking at failure as an opportunity for growth. And then I have a client that is a veteran. And of course, you know, as everybody who goes into the services, they have their training or boot camp or whatever it is. And they have a term that they coined, and so I stole it from him. It's called embracing the suck, right? Really falling in love with the suck, because you understand that by going into that pain voluntarily, accepting that it's going to come, you understand that it's going to make you stronger when you young kids, or if you've seen The Emperor's New Groove, it's a Disney movie. It came out gajillions of years ago. David Spade is the llama, and there's a scene where he's going to plunge down a waterfall with one of the main characters, and he knows it's coming, and he's just had one horrible moment after another, and he says, "There's a waterfall, right?" And he goes, "Mm-hmm." And David Spade's response as a llama, he goes, "Bring it on." Like, he prepared us, he was poised, he was ready. That's called embracing the suck. That's shifting your relationship to hardship and failure, right? Acceptance, big piece. Some things you can change, some things you can't. And when we need to wallow, when something terrible happens, we sink down, we're in our bed, that's that phase where we need to mourn. Give yourself time to mourn. There's nothing wrong with that. It's essentially, that's an important piece of it. Give yourself that time to mourn. Do the grieving. And then you get to that place where you go, okay, you accept it. I can't change this. I didn't ask for it, or maybe I did, but I can't. This can't change. So what can I change? The things you can't change, you can't change. But the things you can empower yourself to. And knowing that difference. And you know when you can't change something, we all do. And we also know that things can be different. That's the resilience piece right there, okay? And one of my all-time absolute favorite ones in terms of cognitive flexibility is humor. And this is the one where when I bring it up, people go, "Oh, I know, humor's the best, laughter's the best medicine, blah, 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 blah." Who the hell wants to laugh right now? Let me offer you this. Part of cognitive flexibility and a huge piece of resilience isn't just about building up all these factors and understanding the different types of resilience and blah, 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 blah. You know what the biggest piece is? And this is a secret. This is like a gold nugget. You can live tremendous horror and pain and agony right next to joy. and being able to allow the two to be able to coexist at the same time. You want to coexist with people, coexist with your feelings. Let them be there too. Just because you're going through a hard time or you're suffering, you're in a moment of pain, a place of mourning, it's okay to allow joy to come in through. You're not betraying or invalidating your experience or your emotions. You're just letting a little bit of hope in. So let laughter come through. If you like slapstick movies, do that. If you like comedy, do that. I mean, the other day I binge watched stand-up comedy shows on Netflix because I needed a moment to connect with myself and God, and I needed to laugh. I needed to feel it in my body. Okay. It is one of the most fun things to do to build resilience, is really being able to drop into that place and just say, F everything. I just want to laugh right now. Right. For some, it's hanging out with friends, and that's bringing in that humor there. Isn't there? I like my brother. I can't keep bringing him up. My brother-in-law is a character and a half, and my nieces and nephews and my kids will come over just to hang out with him because he is so funny, and they just need that comic relief. So not so much anymore these days because of our quarantine, but even from before, there's sometimes we just have those funny people in our lives. So however you can allow humor to come in, but also seek it and foster it in your life. Okay. And last but not least of all of our factors, meaning and purpose. And here, this is a short piece. I'm going to give you 3 quotes, and I'm also going to give you a recommendation. One of my favorite sayings of all times is from Friedrich Nietzsche. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. One of the most powerful messages I've ever heard in my life. Followed not necessarily in a second, but right next to Carl Jung. Man can stand the most incredible hardships when he is convinced they make sense. So what does that mean? It means, okay, I'm going through this hardship. This is difficult. This is not easy. But you know what? You make the sense out of it. This is why resilience is so personal, because you make the sense out of it. You bring the meaning to it. Which brings us to Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, also in the list of recommendations. Yeah, also in the, yes, Christy, the goofy animals, yeah. For reading, highly recommend it, Man's Search for Meaning. I believe every single person on the planet should read it. He was a psychiatrist, and him and his family were sent to the concentration camps during the Second World War. He lost his pregnant wife and his parents, and he actually had the manuscript to that book in his coat, and obviously it was taken away from him. When he came out and was liberated in 1946, he wrote this book in 12 days and was published. It went all over the world. To talk about his experience and how he went through it. And he's extraordinary human being. He died, I think, in 1973 or 1976. And lo and behold, I will share, I didn't think there would be another publication from Viktor Frankl, but it turns out that this year in 2020, they went into the archives of his materials, and they had the manuscript of this final book that was published this year, and it's called Yes to Life. I did not put that one in the list of recommendations, but I can add it before I send it out. Again, by Viktor Frankl. And I will leave you with this. Not leave you, but I'll bring it into it. Not going to get into the biggest some of the pieces that I have here because I am going over time. But what I leave you with is to help support all of these components and factors of resilience are stress management skills, right? So that really is about being able to drop into a relaxed body so you can engage your prefrontal cortex. So anything that involves deep abdominal breathing, mind-body connection, yoga, tai chi, martial arts, guided meditation, visualizations, all repeated prayers, All of those things are stress management skills. So what are you managing? You're managing your response capacity to a stressor. Because remember, again, stress doesn't exist. It's value neutral. Things that happen all around you are value neutral. You give it value by how you react or how you respond. So stress management skills, big, big piece. And again, for those who want to stay for the Q&A, I can go ahead and teach. There is a combined stress management breathing skill that I teach. It's not that I'm reinventing the wheel. What I do is I've over the course of time of working with my clients, I figured out how to combine certain components of certain individual relax nuclear bomb of relaxation stress management technique that anybody can learn in a matter of minutes, and you can use it immediately. Okay. So the idea is, and I'm going to do it in the next 5 minutes because I really am over time, is this. Okay. You can eat that. Okay. So what we're going to do is, you can do this laying down, you can do it sitting down, you can do it any way you want. So before I go ahead and teach the breathing technique, I want you all to take your hands. If you're sitting down, put on your hands to where you can feel the bones in your butt, your butt bones. Yeah. So you want to feel those, right? Okay. Make sure you feel pressed into them, right? You can feel them. Right. So once you've located your butt bones, okay, you can stand up, and I want you to locate your hip bones and kind of press into them. Really feel your hip bones, okay? So once you've done that, you just sit for a few seconds and try to feel the lingering sensation of the butt bones and your hip bones, right? So what I want you to do, so I'm going to show you here, I want you to connect an imaginary line on your hip bones, an imaginary line on your butt bones, and make a square out of it. So that's a square in your pelvic area. Okay, if you guys all see that, now expand it into a cube. So essentially, it's like your whole pelvic area is sitting in a cube. And there's a reason why I needed you to visualize that space in your mind. Okay, is because I'm going to teach you a breathing, combine this with a breathing technique. But and this piece here, this relaxing of the pelvic floor piece, that one don't do when you're driving. That one do at home. All the other breathing stuff you can do whenever. When I'm going to do the breathing exercising now, I'm going to say, okay, feel you drop into relaxation. Feel you dropping into that feeling of tranquility and release and relax. Focus on the pelvic floor area and imagine every single muscle fiber in your body. If you try to do it now, just think of it right now. Relaxed, in a state of comfort, complete release of that area. You might even start to notice that your back and shoulders kind of sink forward, almost with what I call noodle body. You start to feel like you're feeling sort of kind of like a noodle, right? That's the idea. And the reason why I combine this specific technique with the other breathing is that it is physiologically impossible to be in a heightened state of arousal and do this exercise and be in a relaxed state with the lower pelvis. If your pelvic floor is in a complete relaxed state, it is physiologically impossible to be in a heightened arousal state. Which, by the way, that's why sex is wonderful in orgasms. That's also a huge piece, right? If you're in a relaxed state and you're enjoying yourself, that's a relaxation. Enjoy that, okay? So here's the breathing. You're going to breathe energy, air, however you want to see it, through your feet. You're going to breathe in, and I'm just going to give the instructions right now. You breathe in through your feet. When you breathe in, your belly pokes out like a Buddha. You breathe in through the nose. You breathe in through the feet, up the legs, up your spine. Hold the energy here. And then on the exhale, you exhale through the mouth twice as long as you inhale. So if you inhale on the count of 2, you exhale on the count of 4. You start typically inhaling on the count of 4. So the count of 4 is, and the exhale is, you see how that goes? Exhale is twice as long as the inhale. While you're cycling that breathing, you're keeping the tongue at the roof of the mouth, okay? When you inhale, you can imagine the energy, any color or matter that you choose. Say you want pink energy and you want it to be like mercury. You envision that pink mercury circling through your body from the earth and down. Now, when you exhale, you're exhaling everything negative that you want to get rid of, that you're not interested in keeping. You inhale energy. You inhale positive intent. You inhale affirmations. And you can program that however you want. This is one of the reasons why I think it's one of the most powerful methods you can use, is because you can tailor this to your need in the moment. Say you want to feel more confident. You inhale affirmation of confidence. Exhale stress and fear through every pore of your body. And between breaths, there's a little space. And I'm going to show the example. You can float in that space, and that is the most peaceful place you could possibly be in. I know this is a lot, but we're going to go through things right now, and I'm going to do 3 courses of breath to at least so you give you an idea of what it is. So here we go. So again, you're imagining you have that cube in your pelvic floor. You just leave it there. Breathe energy from the earth, up the legs, up the spine. Gently hold. Tongue in the roof of the mouth always. Exhale twice as long. In between breaths, you float. Okay? So inhale. Gently hold. Exhale twice as long. And float between breaths. And inhale. Feel your body drop into the comfort. Exhale. Inhale peace and comfort and tranquility. Hold. And as you exhale, see all the tension dissolve, the stress go, the hurt, the angst. Float and inhale. And exhale. Okay. And you can gently come back when you're ready. Start opening your eyes. So I'm hoping that you sort of got the idea with that. I did also, part of the goodie bag, put a progressive muscle relaxation PDF that you can read and practice, okay? And for today, that concludes my presentation on resilience. There's obviously, as you can see, there's a lot more to it. I could go on for all day. But I kind of wanted to give you guys a skeleton of what resilience is, what you can do, give you some here and now things that you could start implementing in your life right now, and hopefully get some, relief and comfort with whatever it is you might be facing now. Okay, so if anybody has some Q&As, let me see. How do I find a mental health professional who is trauma informed? NIM, typically, if somebody is certified in trauma, they'll state so in their credentials, and it'll say, I forget what the acronyms are because there's so many different kinds, but if you look, certified trauma expert or mental health or things of the sort, you're looking for certified trauma therapist, that sort of, I forget what those acronyms, but they're different in every state, which is why I can't remember all of them. Even as a mental health therapist, our acronyms change by state. But typically, if you look on a therapist's website or you look at their credentials, you can even ask them, but they typically will cite whether or not they are they're certified as a trauma expert, and if they are, then they already know what trauma informed care is about. Okay. Any other questions for today? No. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming. I really appreciate it. I think, let me see. Oh, well, thank you. Okay, that's great. Leah, I don't know if you wanted to stay on and if you had anything you wanted. Oh, you're so very welcome, Christy and Effie. Oh, great, Effie. I'm so glad you came. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, wonderful. So glad you guys enjoyed that. So Leah, if you wanted to stay behind, I don't know if you're still here. I don't still see.
Yeah, I'm still here. I can't get my video to work.
Okay. All right.
The host stopped it, but that was amazing. And I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. Again, if you have any questions, go ahead. Feel free to throw those in your email as well. I'll be happy to answer them if things come up after the fact. Okay.
Thank you so much, Ingrid.
Thank you, and have a great day. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.